But should we talk about what is going on in the news? Lots going on. If you are waking up this morning, this is the headline in the Sunday Times, our sister publication. Middle classes support VAT on private schools, says Phillipson. Was news to me, that.
Well, of course she's going to say that, but I don't know who these people are that she's pointed to that are so overjoyed. Oh, thank God. Thank God you charged us VAT. Oh, our Christmas gift. Yeah. I don't know what she's talking about. I think it just talks to MPs, you know, these days, especially these Labour ones, they're in their own little bubbles. They're only talking to the same people, and so they're not understanding that they have to sell if this is a vision, they have to sell it.
They do.
They can't just turn around and say, oh, well, I spoke to 5 people that already agree with me, and they agree.
So let's just be very clear about this. There are 500,000 kids, roughly, in private education, OK? That saves the country £4.5 billion.
Yeah.
Now, the government is saying that, actually, this is going to raise £1.5 billion, but the thing that they haven't factored in is the sheer numbers of parents who cannot afford to send their kids to private school anymore, who are coming out of the private system into state education. I know this from my sister and her friends. There aren't any places for them.
What I've been shocked at, and it's not just this story, it's a lot of stories that have gone on recently, is the sort of only one step forward politics, that they can only see one step forward. They can't predict the next 5 steps. They don't do any sort of crisis planning or what if this goes wrong. I mean, that was such an obvious thing that was going to happen. So then you come to, well, are they not thinking, or do they not care? I don't know what the answer is.
I think this is class warfare. Actually, I think it's idealistic. I think it's an ideology. I think it's driven by that. Already you've seen schools like Alton in Hampshire closing, Downham Prep School in Norfolk, Carter School closing as a result of all of this. Just in terms of that, by the way, the head of the governors of that particular school is Alistair Darling, a Labour grandee. I mean, can't they see what they're doing?
I don't think they can. As you say, maybe it is ideology. Maybe it is, unfortunately, and I hate to think that this goes on, but, you know, we've put out a policy, we'll look ridiculous if we backtrack now.
True.
Even though it would be for
But wouldn't it show strength if you backtrack? To say, look, we've thought about this, we've reconsidered it, it doesn't work, we're backing off.
It depends. If you make too many U-turns, they'll just say you're just spinning around. So, you know, we've had politicians that have U-turned too many times. So you've got to pick your U-turns. But I do think, I mean, the pressure on this one. But then you look at what Labour's doing sort of across the board. No one's happy. They seem to have just set out to just irritate everyone, from farmers to waspy women to... It's just, who is your friend?
So she says something else. Bridget Phillipson says that middle-class parents support this, as you say. Oh, thank goodness, VAT's been added to the cost of my education. At the same time, she then says, well, that's great, because I, Bridget Phillipson, I'm going to be the voice of the middle-class pushy parent. The pushy parents are the ones that are pushing their kids into private school because they're working 3, 4, 5 jobs to ensure that the kids can go to private school. There is an enormous dichotomy here. I don't think she's actually worked out what she's saying.
I don't think she does, and I think we've got to be really careful in this country at the moment. I really mean this seriously. We are disincentivizing people wanting to push for better. We are in a situation now,
I would agree with that,
where living, you know, and I know this, oh, boo-hoo, you know, middle-class people not sending their kids to school that they want, blah, 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 whatever. But you've got to think, you know, a lot of, as a parent, what you want is for your children to have better than you had. And what we're in, no matter where you sit on the economic scale, is that people now are seeing that their children cannot have what they had, whether that is a private education, whether that is being able to go out and rent your own place at 18 or whatever it is. We're just seeing this slow standards of no one can really do the things that they used to do. We're not increasing things. We're not saying, oh, well, you know, we could only afford this back in the day, and now look what you've got. We're sort of going backwards on standards on all measures. So her wanting to be the champion of middle classes, you're not, because we need some outside-of-the-box thinking.
Well, that's right. Yes, it's dumbing down to the lowest common denominator. You're right. There's no aspiration. In the United States, they have a very different view of this, which is, you know, to celebrate success, to say that's fantastic that you've done so well. It is a very strange system we live in. let's look at the front page of the Sunday Telegraph this morning. If you're waking up, this is other good news, by the way, for people who are waking up thinking, how can they afford things? Families face £8,000 New Year tax raid. Of course, we've got Rachel Reeves, £20 billion hole, even though no one can actually corroborate that figure. She's then raised £40 billion in taxes. So these Labour tax rises come into effect next year, forcing households to pay thousands more from their children's education, as we've just been talking about, to council tax. So the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, warned that the tax burden is rising to levels we have never seen in this country.
Yep. And it's a worry. And I speak to a lot of people, and I'll include myself in this, where there is a point where you think, will I be worse off if I earn more? And I think a lot of people have, and I've heard of people say, oh, I've gone on reduced hours because if I earn too much, then I'll be paying more tax. And that is, it's going against people trying to be ambitious and build better for themselves. People are basically saying, I've hit a ceiling. If I earn any more, if I do any more work, you know, I'll be worse off.
So
and
what we don't want about aspiration?
I think it's dying. I think aspiration is dying. We're all being sort of put into a little box of like, this is it. That's as far as you can go. Doesn't matter what you do. And I think, you know, especially for people like me who works about 6 jobs, I counted the other day. I have 6 different jobs and sources of revenue, and it's like, actually, I'm killing myself here, but am I feeling the benefit of it? No. I'm not rolling around in money. I'm not going out on expensive foreign holidays or buying expensive watches. I'm just about paying the bills. And I have 6 different jobs. I'm up at 3 a.m. this morning to do it's so. And I think, you know, it's this,
well, we pay a fortune for your advice.
Oh, very good pay. But I do think there is a point of you know, this idea of, oh, work harder, work smarter, get a good education. Well, people are saying, well, I'm working, and it's not just me. You know, there are people out there working 3 jobs that are out listening to this now. You know, they were up at 3 a.m. and they're doing a job, and they're coming home and they're thinking, I'm not feeling the benefit of this. So then when you've got stories like this, well, we need more tax. You just think, no.
But look at the size of the state and the number of people that are actually claiming benefits. That is the problem, because we need to get those people into work. We need to get them off the state. And again, there is a problem. So people say, well, I don't want a job because I'll be worse off, certainly at the beginning of that. And I think that's one of the major problems that we have.
But I do, you know, I'm at that point where I don't blame these people on benefits anymore, because actually maybe they're the smartest ones of all. Because
well, that's what I mean.
We are in a situation, and I think that you've got to, it's about stick and carrot, right? Because you hear all these stories of people that are on benefits, and then it's like, oh, I want to go and train and do something, or I want to start slow and I want to do 3 days a week. It's like, will you be worse off? And so we need to address that, where it's actually work pays. Because there are people that are working 3 jobs, and it's not paying. So
let me just give you the figures. 946,000 under 25s, not in education, employment or training. That's 1 million people. On top of that, 9.25 million economically inactive between 16 and 64. Out of that, 2.8 million not in work or looking for a job due to ill health. So you've got a sick society. We know the NHS and the burden that is being placed on the NHS. But you've got 9 million people there. Another million, that's 10 million people out of a population of what? 60, what are we now? 63, 64 or whatever it is. But that is a huge percentage. So those people who are working and doing 6 jobs are paying for those people who are not in work.
Yeah, I know, but we need to incentivize. You should be able to do 1 job and it affords your life. Yeah. And it doesn't need to be a high-skilled job. It could just be anything from cleaning the streets to checking out at the tills. That job should pay for your roof over your head, your heating, your food, and it should be fine. And if you want the niceties of foreign holidays or whatever, then you have to get a better job or take on another job. It shouldn't be this hard to just get by. So the idea of the benefits thing is like, oh, well, we'll just pull it. We'll just say you have to go back to work. It's like, well, no, because as you say, there are some people sick. And on that point on being sick, I said maybe we shouldn't have shut down the country for years.
Well, we know
maybe that would have
that's
been the smart thing.
That's a great point, and about what we did to the psychology of young people, and we kept them in their little bubbles on their own, and they lost confidence and don't want to go out to work. They have no idea how to socialise. Sorry?
You made a generation of hypochondriacs.
Well, 100%. Just very quickly, let's look at a mega poll. Labour, I think it's fair to say, isn't exactly having a honeymoon, not enjoying a honeymoon period. This is in the Times this morning. So Keir Starmer was swept to power in a landslide victory. Amazingly, it was less than 6 months ago. It feels like a lifetime to me. The next general election, it would look very different. They are saying this is a new mega poll looking at seat-by-seat analysis. It's the first one, or the first significant one, since the general election, what it shows, Labour would lose the majority. It would lose 200 seats that it won in July. So essentially, Labour goes from 411, they lose 87 seats to the Tories, 67 to Reform UK, 26 to the SNP, which is interesting. So they would be on 228, the Tories at 222, Reform at 72, a hung parliament 6 months in.
So I want to say that this is not surprising, but it is quite interesting. Now, I think everyone needs to remember, including Labour politicians, Labour didn't win because anyone thought they were good. People were furious at the Tories, and there was a split of that right or the centre, whatever you want to call it, vote between Reform and the Tories. So Labour aren't there because they're wildly popular. They sort of won by default, which is why I think they should have come in a little bit more cautiously and read the room and said, you know what, people aren't that happy we're here, let's go slow, rather than the way that they've gone. What I do find interesting about this poll is the sort of return to the Tories, because, you know, you read the papers now and it seems all the energy is with Reform, and 67 seats is not bad for your second time at the polls. But 72, sorry. So this return to the Conservatives is quite interesting. I don't see that would happen, and I do wonder about this split. And if you're saying, as is pointed to there, it would be a hung parliament, well, then this whole idea of would the Tories and Reform have to get into bed together? Would we be heading to a coalition?
I keep saying this. And in fact, there's an editorial in the Times this morning saying the only way forward is for Reform to get into bed with the Tories. The whole point was when the Brexit Party stood down and there was an 80-seat majority handed to Boris Johnson, they then forgot all about that, the supply and demand agreement. And of course, there is no trust between those two parties, and certainly Nigel Farage, there is no way.
Well, I mean, you know, it would be a betrayal to those Reform voters.
I think that's right, and that's
but
what
I think there's a difference between forming a coalition government where you've got, you know, the seats there rather than what they did before, which is stand aside and let them take the seats.
Well, we'll see. Let me know your thoughts on that.